Okay, hi there everybody. I'm going to try to help you out with the unit this week on Aristotelian logic, because I think it's kind of challenging. So if you kind of just listen to my lecture here, maybe it'll make it a little clearer for you. Okay? First thing we're going to talk about today is the concept of validity in an argument. And what makes an argument valid or invalid has very little to do with the truth of the premises. Okay? And what I mean by that is all arguments that we're going to deal with have two parts to them. They will have two premises which lead to one conclusion. Okay? Now, you can have a valid argument in which, and this is an easy one, where everything is true. Okay, let's take a look at one as an example. Let's say I have the following argument. All mammals have lungs. Okay, I hope that made it all the way in there. Yeah, you can all see that. Okay? All whales are mammals. Premise 2. 3 dots means therefore. Therefore, all whales have lungs. Now let's take a look at this particular argument. All mammals have lungs. Is that true? Yes, that's one of the defining qualities of mammals, so we'll give that a big true. All whales are mammals. True again. Now, this statement, all whales have lungs. Is that true? Yes. These are all true, which is awesome, right? But the question is the argument valid? Now, what determines the validity of the argument is this. If, and that's a key word here, if these premises were true, does it absolutely force the conclusion to be true with 100% certainty? Okay? And in this case, it does. If all mammals had lungs, so you have here the mammals category, right? So you got things with lungs. Somewhere inside there is mammals, right? Because all mammals have to have lungs. All whales are mammals. So whales is inside that. So therefore, if these were both true, this has to be true. Therefore, this argument is valid. Okay? Now that one's a pretty easy one to understand, but sometimes you can have one like, let's say, this. All four-legged creatures have wings. Okay? And all spiders have 4 legs. Therefore, all spiders have wings. Now check this out. All four-legged creatures have wings. True or false? Well, it's utterly false, right? All spiders have 4 legs. Well, we know that's false, right? Because one of the defining qualities of spider, I think they have 8 legs. And the conclusion's also false. All spiders have wings. We know that's not true. However, is this a valid argument? Oddly enough, in this case, the answer is yes. Why? Because the only condition that determines whether an argument is valid or not is this. If this were true, and if this were true, would it absolutely force this to be true? The answer is yes. Even though they're all false, it doesn't matter. That's not what we're talking about here. Validity means if this were true, and if this were true, would it force this to be true? So in this case, this is also a valid argument. Okay? So you want to be careful when trying to understand the concept of validity. It's real easy when you got all truths and it makes it valid. But again, the key to determining whether, and again, forgive me, I've never done this whole video thing before, so I'm kind of moving around and trying to figure it all out. So sometimes you can have true propositions, and the conclusion might be false. And we'll see if we have a valid argument. Let's try this one. If I owned all the gold in Fort Knox, I would be wealthy. That's probably true, right? If I owned all the gold in Fort Knox, I would be wealthy. Super. I do not own all the gold in Fort Knox. Sadly, that's also true. Therefore, I am not wealthy. Oddly enough, in my case, that conclusion happens to be true as well. Is the argument valid? Okay? If I owned all the gold in Fort Knox, I'd be wealthy. I do not own all the gold in Fort Knox, therefore I am not wealthy. In this case, the argument is invalid. Why? Okay? And again, it deals with the idea that these two force the truth of this, force it to be so with 100% certainty. In my case, I don't own all the gold in Fort Knox. Or if I owned all the gold in Fort Knox, I'd be wealthy. That's going to be true for everybody, right? I don't own all the gold in Fort Knox. Therefore, I'm not wealthy. In my case, those are all true. But what if Bill Gates was answering this? Bill Gates does not own... If Bill Gates owned all the gold in Fort Knox, he would certainly be wealthy. Okay? Bill Gates does not own all the gold in Fort Knox. However, Bill Gates is still wealthy. So in this case, these two premises, whether or not they are true, do not force this conclusion with 100% certainty. Therefore, it is invalid. Okay? And that's the key. Don't get hung up when you're looking at some of these examples that they use in the book or on the quiz, that if these are true, this has to be true. That's not it at all. You have to say, if it were true, if, that's the key. If it were true, would it make the conclusion be true? Regardless of the utter ridiculousness of the premise. Because we now know you can have two false premises and a false conclusion, and you can still have a valid argument. Okay? So, hopefully that kind of clears up a little bit about the issue of validity. Now, one of the other topics that's brought up in the unit this week deals with what are called categorical syllogisms. Okay? Let me talk to you a little bit about a categorical syllogism. There are four, and what is a syllogism? A syllogism basically means this. You got two premises, you got a conclusion. Okay? I'll give you an example. All men are mortal. Socrates was a man. Therefore, Socrates was mortal. Now, when you have a syllogism like this, there's certain terms we're going to have to come to grips with. Let me get a different colored marker. Hopefully that'll show up nicely. There are different types of terms in categorical syllogisms. There's what is called a major term, a minor term, and a middle term. Okay? And the first thing you want to do whenever you get a categorical syllogism is figure out what's what, because that's going to be critical to effectively answering these types of questions. Okay? Very easy to do. And the first thing you want to do is look in the conclusion. And the first thing you do is you find the subject of the conclusion, which is Socrates, and the predicate term in the conclusion. Okay? The subject always comes first. The predicate comes second after some form of the word to be. In this case, the word is was. Socrates' subject was mortal is the predicate term. Now, once you've done that, you're almost home. Okay? The major term is always the predicate term in the conclusion. Always, without exception. So in this case, the major term is mortal. Got it? Super. The minor term is always the subject term in the conclusion. So, I got my major term, I got my minor term. Now, if it's a major term in the conclusion, it's a major term in the premise. So as soon as you find the word mortal, I can go up here, and I now know, here's my major term, and here's Socrates. I know here's my minor term. Okay? The middle term is always the term that appears in both premises, but is not in the conclusion. Now, by process of elimination, that's pretty easy. Men. Men or man, either way, it appears in both premises, but not the conclusion. I now know my major, my minor, and my middle term. Okay? So, whenever you get a syllogism, the very first thing you do is break it down into major, middle, and minor terms. Okay? Super. That's a great start. So, once you've done that, the next thing you want to look at is what type of syllogism is it? There are four. Only four types of syllogisms in Aristotelian logic. Okay? 2,500 years ago, our good friend Aristotle thought all this stuff up and basically figured out this was a way to do what he called deductive reasoning. The difference between inductive and deductive is this. Deductive reasoning deals with 100% certainty. In this case, if this were true, all men are mortal, which it is, and Socrates was a man, which is also true. If these were both true, does it absolutely 100% guarantee that Socrates was mortal, the truth of that statement? And the answer is yes. Okay? 100%. On the other hand, inductive reasoning deals with probability. Okay? Ben Roethlisberger, the quarterback for the Steelers, completes 65% of his passes. Premise 1, which is true. Premise 2, Ben Roethlisberger is throwing a pass. Okay? Conclusion, the pass will be completed. Probably, if indeed he completes 65% of his passes. But that does not mean with absolute certainty the pass will be complete. That's the difference between deductive and inductive. Inductive deals with probabilities. It might happen, depending on other things. You could add other premises to an inductive argument to make change it. Ben Roethlisberger completes 65% of his passes. We had that one. However, he only completes 20% of his passes in the rain. It is raining. Therefore, is the likelihood of him completing the pass going up or down? Well, in this case, it went down. Okay? So, with inductive arguments, the probability can change depending on what other premises you throw in there. But with deductive, if these two are true, there is nothing in the universe you can add that somehow is going to make Socrates not mortal. 100% guarantee. Nothing changes it. Okay? So, when Aristotle figured this out, he says that there are four what are called categorical syllogisms. Let's take a look at them, shall we? The first, he called a universal affirmative. All cats are furry. I think all cats have fur. I might be wrong, but it doesn't really matter. The key to a universal affirmative, universal means all syllogisms have two components. They have a quality and they have a quantity. Right? So, in this case, the quantity will always be one of three words. All, no or none, or some. That tells you how many I'm talking about. In this case, I'm talking about all cats. So it is universal. Every cat in the universe I'm talking about here when I say all cats. And the quality will either be affirmative or negative. I am either stating something is or is not the case. In this case, I am stating an affirmative. All cats are something. In this case, furry. That is a universal affirmative. That is referred to in Aristotelian logic as an A statement. Any statement that looks like this, all S is P, Okay? S just means a subject. I don't care what word you put in there. All fish, all whales, all Pittsburgh Steelers fans, all Strayer students. S is the subject. Okay? P is the predicate term. All Strayer students are intelligent. All Strayer faculty are incredibly handsome. Another true statement. So, on the other hand, when you look at a universal affirmative, you look for any phrase, any proposition, in the form, all something is something. All something are something. Okay? All S is P. That's a universal affirmative. Okay? So, the opposite of that is a universal negative. No, let me think of a good one. No cats are fish. Best I could do on short notice. Okay. In this case, again, you have a quantity, no, okay? And in this case, I am saying no cats are something. So this is what is called a universal negative. You see the word no or none in a syllogism. It's a negative. Okay, plain and simple. See no or none, there's your key. This is a universal negative. This is referred to as an E statement. So now we got two things. We got an A, all S is P. We have an E, no S is P. And again, S is just subject and predicate. Doesn't matter. You can plug any words you want in there. That is a universal negative. So right now, two statements, an A and an E. A universal affirmative and a universal negative. So far, so good, right? Now, there are also what he called particular affirmatives and negatives. A particular will always have the word some in it. Some donuts are tasty. Now we know that's not a true statement. You know why? Because all donuts are tasty. But for the sake of arguments, let's assume it is true. Okay? In this case, what is the quantity this time? The quantity says some. So it's not universal. I'm not talking about every donut. I'm talking about some donuts. So in this case, you have what is called a particular affirmative. I'm saying something is the case. Some donuts are tasty. Okay? That is called an I statement. Some S is P. Okay? So now we have an A, an E, and an I. The last statement, some Strayer students are not aliens. Let's hope that's the case. In this case, again, it is a particular some, okay? But the word not is the key here. This is a particular negative. This one up here is a particular affirmative. I'm saying something is the case. I'm saying something is not the case. This is called an O statement. So we got an A, an E, an I, and an O. Those are your four categorical syllogisms. Okay? So what do we know now? What have we learned? We now know major, middle, and minor terms. That's pretty important. Okay? So we now know how to break down a syllogism. We understand validity. Validity means if both premises are true, it's going to force the conclusion to be true. Okay? And finally, we now understand the basic types of categorical syllogisms there are that are going to help you understand how to break down these. Now what we're going to do next is we're going to go through a series of steps to determine the validity of any given argument. Okay? There's a number of things you need to look for, several steps to determine whether or not any particular syllogism is valid or not. Okay? That's going to be my next little video. So if you're content with this segment, I hope this was helpful. So I'm going to move on next to the next section. So take a short little break and then join me in a sec.